is it possible that Turkey could do that would remotely bother the United States?
Well, this is a complex set of tensions between the United States and Turkey that have been building for a couple of years, grow out of Syria, and differences in view as to with whom the U.S. should ally to fight Daesh or ISIS. But in this current situation, what happened was it appears President Trump, and Vice President Pence got angry that this Pastor Andrew Brunson, was moved to house arrest from prison. It was something that I'm sure the Turkish side felt was a positive gesture, showing that we're on a path, or they're on a path to resolve the tensions. But apparently, President Trump interpreted or misinterpreted this goodwill gesture as somehow a half step that was less than he thought he had been promised. And I've listened to the commentary, the vigorous commentary by Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu and others, that there was no such special deal whereby there'd be immediate release of Pastor Brunson. But I think President Trump just got upset that the pastor wasn't released and was led to believe he would be.
Yeah. Well, that is as may be. We don't know too much about the accuracy of reports of conversations between the two sides, because we're only hearing from the interested party themselves. But let's go back to the question I put at the beginning, which is Turkey has said it will retaliate because the US has imposed sanctions. What is it that Turkey could do that would remotely bother the United States?
Well, you know what? I don't think it's even going to get to that. I mean, there's not a whole lot, right? I mean, so far, Turkey has put reciprocal sanctions on 2 U.S. government ministers. To me, that was actually a wise step. It was a tit-for-tat step that showed Turkey is not escalating. And I would just say I hope that that is what continues, because I know, or I believe the parties were very close to an agreement on a whole series of difficult legal factors, and the clock sort of ran out of time. And I think the United States was expecting something to happen first. Turkey wanted something else to happen first. And President Trump kind of stole the show and made his public and humiliating Twitter threats to Turkey. So what Turkey could do is, I don't even want to speculate. I mean, I don't think it's going to come to that. But, the U.S. uses the air base in Incirlik for operations in both countries' mutual interests. But beyond that, I think the economic interests are quite asymmetrical between the United States and Turkey. And as you know, the United States has been talking about possible economic measures as a further set of steps. But again, I don't think it'll come to that.
Okay. All right. Incirlik was going to be one of the areas that I wanted to discuss, but you've mentioned it. These are 2 NATO allies. It is unseemly, to say the very least, that we are seeing this toing and froing between these 2 NATO allies, which might lead some to suggest that Turkey is perhaps moving more into the Russia sphere of influence. And certainly that has happened considerably more than one would have expected 3 or 4 years ago.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly if you go back to the time when the Turkish military shot down the Russian military aircraft over Turkish airspace, yeah, the relationship between Russia and Turkey has shifted dramatically. And as we know, Turkey and Russia and Iran are cooperating through the so-called Astana process to try to forge a political settlement of the Syrian civil war. But in my experience, studying history and having served for 23 years as a U.S. diplomat, focused a lot on Turkey and on Russia, I simply know that there's no way Turkey could fundamentally shift its strategic orientation toward Russia. Turkey has fought more wars against Russia than against any other country. If you go back to Ottoman history, that hasn't been a successful record. I know from my own discussions with senior Turkish officials, they don't want to be left alone in the Middle East with Russia and Iran. Fundamentally, Turkey knows it's anchored in the transatlantic community. It's got the 2nd largest military in NATO. Its home is in the transatlantic community. So I don't worry so much about there being an actual serious long-term shift. I think Turkey is playing the cards it's dealt in not the greatest hand. It has no choice but to cooperate with Russia to stabilize the situation in Syria, since the U.S. had been largely absent in Syria, especially after we recall President Obama failed to fulfill his infamous red line after Bashar al-Assad used chemical weapons against his own people.